masks on. Okay, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. I'd like to convene the Reading Select Board. Today is the 4th, January 4th, thank you, 2022, 7 p.m. Today we have joining us via Zoom, Carlo Bacci, Select Board member, and in the room with me is Ann Landry, Mark Doxer, Chris Haley, and Karen Herrick in person. So tonight's a very special meeting for us. In addition to our regular business, we have the pleasure of introducing our next town manager to you all, and he was kind enough to bring his family, so we're looking forward to that. And we'll welcome him and vote to make that official. Next, we will have any Select Board liaison reports and the town manager report. We'll have an opportunity for public comment. At 7:50, we will address our consent agenda, which is discuss and vote on the RMHS Fieldhouse as a polling location for a special election on January 25th for the vocational school. We'll also vote to declare items as surplus, discuss and vote for 113 Arcadia Avenue, which is an item from the Conservation Commission before us. At 8:10, we will have a discussion of the mediation process related to Mr. Chavel's open meeting law complaints filed against the Select Board on July 21st, July 23rd, August 16th, August 22nd, October 22nd, October 27th, and November 18th. And at 8:20, we will discuss we were scheduled at 8:20 to discuss the status of the Common District Meeting House at Postmark Square. They will be unable to join us tonight, so we will take it up at another meeting. And then we will move then into FY23 budgets. So that'll be a discussion with the town manager and the select board, and we'll start to talk about our priorities. At 9:40, we'll have an update from select board member Mark Doxer on the Meadowbrook Lot 5 and possible access easement to town forest. At 9:50, we can discuss future agenda items, and then we have 4 sets of minutes to approve, and then we will adjourn for the evening. So with that, I guess we could go right into a motion.
Sure. Move that the Select Board approve and execute an employment contract with Fidel Maltese for the position of Town Manager on such terms and conditions contained in the contract distributed to the Board for review and discussion at its meeting tonight, conditioned on his successful completion of Cori-Sori check and a medical examination, and to authorize Jackie Laverde to use the Select Board members' digital signatures to sign said contract as may be needed.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion by board members? Carlo? None appearing. Are we ready for a vote?
Sorry, couldn't be there.
That's okay. If there's no discussion, I think we're ready for a vote. Would you like to vote first, Carlo?
Sure. 100% yes.
100% yes. Ann?
An emphatic yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And myself, Karen, yes. So that's 5-0 in support of Fidel Maltese for being Town Manager 3.0. Welcome. For those of you at home, we're joined by a large number of department heads who, once again, risk life and limb to come out and support this transition for the town. So we appreciate that.
All right. I will put my signature to
Great.
paper and pass it down.
Okay. And then, Fidel, you were kind enough to bring your family up here. We'd love to meet them.
Absolutely.
Do you want to introduce them to us?
Yeah. So this is my wife, Maria Belen Power.
Maria.
We met in high school.
Oh.
So we've known each other for a long time.
Wow. Nice.
In the interview process, I mentioned that we lived in China before children, and we're really excited about this new opportunity for us as a family. Then our oldest daughter is Maya. She is 8. She is in 2nd grade, and the little one is Ana Victoria, and she is 4. She is in pre-K.
The hottest ticket in town. Mom and Dad, thanks for dragging me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
welcome. We understand these are more than full-time positions in public service, and we know it takes a village and a family to support each other. So we're very excited to get to know you.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Reading Select Board, would also like to present you with a Reading Rockets hat, so that you can be officially.
Not required at meetings.
Not required.
Sign this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you. Actually, do you guys want to take a quick picture? We actually don't have Mr. Holmes with us tonight. He's at home celebrating his daughter's birthday. If you would you? Wonderful. I know Amy's really good at this.
I'm not, but.
We would love a picture as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, that'd be great.
How do you want to do you want to do it in the, are you guys okay with?
You want to come into the horseshoe?
Yeah, I guess
we
you
all
can
go
stand all over there, we'll be all behind you, kind of thing, all works out.
With you
Want
and
the
all
whole
the
family
family?
there?
You want to do it alone?
It's a team effort.
Yeah, if you think you can fit everyone, otherwise we can do a couple pictures. There we go.
Amy, you'll direct us if we're perfect.
Great, awesome.
Sure. And I'm gonna, oh,
Oh, that's, sorry.
I think that'll
Yeah, I
work.
can't reach my fingers.
Sorry.
if you can move just a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
All
Called
right,
the
this is
owl.
good, because now Mark, you and Chris are right on the other side. And actually, Ann, closer to, if you don't mind, to Karen. This is so great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Amy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great to have you on board.
All right.
Thank you.
Actually,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming up here.
Thank you so much.
tripping and falling on
Thank
the
you.
first night.
I know I mentioned that, I'd have a copy of the paper for you, for your mother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please, enjoy, I appreciate it, yeah.
We talked about flying more family up.
Okay, well, after this surge, we can have a broader welcome. There's lots of community members that'd love to meet you, and
Yes, I'm sure, Omicron notwithstanding, the room would have been full, and we'd love to do something later, once the surge has subsided, to welcome you with a broader community.
I look forward to it.
well, thank you. All right, okay, with that kickoff, select board members, do we have any liaison reports? Might be kind of, oh, go ahead.
So,
Okay, I'm so glad you guys are not gonna hang around for the budget discussion. I was really worried that everyone was gonna hang around another 2 hours. Very nice.
thanks everybody for coming.
Oh, nice to meet you.
Drive safely.
All right, that's good, we cleared a room. Good job, Mark wanted to do his liaison, we wanted to clear the room.
That was the magic word. Let me just do an update from Recalc. So we had 2 meetings in December, and we actually have 2 more scheduled for January. We made some progress. We moved ahead with a plan for hiring a consultant to gather some information in the community, which is what Jean was already leading, had been approved by town meeting last year. And it's in process, it's going through procurement, getting appropriate candidates, and then there'll be a discussion as to what exactly the Recalc group is looking for them to be doing in data gathering. We also discussed priorities of the different group members, and following the mission to do 2 things. One is to really understand the needs, and then to explore the facilities needs that would go from there. We have set up a joint meeting with the Council on Aging for later this month. I believe it's the 20-something, I forget which, but there's a joint meeting with the Council on Aging to get even more input from the council in terms of what's going on. On the sad side, we have one member that decided to resign from the group. Essentially was more concerned that we weren't making progress. We had enough information already, and there wasn't need for a consultant of the data gathering. And so, so Betty is decided to resign her position. I don't know if she's formally done it, although I think she has, but I need to make sure of that. And if that's the case, I spoke with the chair yesterday. We'd like to encourage candidates to apply ASAP and to engage ASAP to find one other person who would then go through the VASC process. So if there are folks that are interested that held back before but are interested now, it'd be great for them to come forward. I'll just make sure with Laura that we received that resignation letter. And that's my update.
Did you have any bonus candidates that weren't able to be on the first time you pointed up?
No.
Okay, just the perfect amount, okay.
Yeah.
Great, well, I hope some folks, there's a lot of excitement around that project, so I'm sure somebody from the community will be excited to get involved.
Yeah, just to plug the paper just for a second, there was a really nice write-up about the meeting that talked about kind of where each person was coming from. So you can get a lot of background information on what's happening just from reading the article in the paper.
Great, awesome. Other reports, Anne?
The Board of Health met last night. They are moving in the direction of approving a public indoor mask mandate. They will vote on, their plan is to vote on at their Thursday night meeting, likely to make it effective for the following day. And they're just, they wanted to make sure that they had time to provide notice to the business community as well as to finalize language with town council. So I think it seems that folks should expect that a public indoor mask mandate to be effective Friday. That's most likely to happen.
Very good. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. I just have the school committee voted 6-0 to expand the METCO program by another 40 students. So kudos to Curtis Martin and Dr. Milichevsky for getting that squared away, and it's going to result in another $250,000 of funding to Reading because of it. In addition, it was noted that like only one graduate this year around was from the METCO program, so this is going to actually expand upon that. So that just seems like a staggering number to just one person be graduating over.
Right.
But no, it's definitely a good thing for Reading. Look forward to seeing how that goes.
Great. That's great news. Great. Carlo?
Thanks. I was unable to attend Board of Health. I am one of the liaisons, and I was on a plane. But I heard Ann say that they needed town council, and I was just curious. We already had an indoor mask mandate. Why do we need to? Did they say why they needed town council's help?
I think it was for the language of how to draft the motion.
But we had one last time.
They wanted to run it by town council.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I think some of it was also about like encouraging, without by way of a mandate, encouraging particular masks like surgical masks, KN95, or they wanted to encourage particular masks at the same time as mandating masks. So I think it's not going to be identical to the motion that was previously passed. So there, I don't think it's that may be part of it. But I think, Kevin Sexton, strongly suggested that town council review a motion before it was adopted.
Right, just curious, thanks. No reports for me. I watched a few meetings, but, CPDC met several weeks ago about the Street building, and that's ongoing. Pleasant Street Center, as you know, instituted a mask mandate for the senior center. The Board of Health meeting prior to last night, and that's about it. My busy season is over, so hopefully I'll be able to attend more meetings.
Congratulations, Carla.
Super.
Welcome back.
I'm glad you brought up that CPDC meeting. I do believe there is a meeting coming up very early this month for additional input on 40R. Bob, is that correct? I'm sorry, I should have asked Jean while she was here.
Hi, Karen. I don't know the date on that, but yeah, there is an upcoming meeting.
I'm just gonna see if I can pull up town hall right now.
Because their intention is to move forward to annual town meeting with a zoning article, so it does go through a public process.
Yeah, let me just see if we can pull that up really quickly. It is really time for us to, really understand what we would like in our community and have our 40R reflected as much as possible. So I see Zoning Board of Appeals on January 6th. I think that actually might be the meeting they're gonna take it up. That would be January 6th at 7 p.m. There's also a meeting about a community garden coming up, which has now been publicized. This is it's on the website, and it is for tomorrow night. And it is being proposed from Matera Cabin. It doesn't have to be the only community garden in Reading, but if anybody who's interested in that, if you remember, we got an earmark award from our legislators last year, and there's been a lot of planning and work going into this, and I think the community, they welcome more input, and they're excited to share what they've come up with the community. So that's on 1/5/22. The select board and some members of staff have been scheduled for a tour of the Rmld facilities on January 20th at bright and early at 7:30 a.m. And that'll be a gateway to discussions about economic development and, whether there are some synergies and some things we can collaborate on with regards to their building and that antique building. So I'm looking forward to that, although I know it's going to be 25 degrees below that morning. And aside from that, I'll just say what I should have said earlier, that tonight's meeting of the select board is being recorded for RCTV. Rob is handling this for us, and it's available on Comcast Channel 22 or Verizon Channel 33. And check out rctv.org for more information and for replay times. That's all I've got. Okay, let's go back to our agenda then. Okay, so we've cleared the room. So, Bob, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Bob, town manager reports.
Yeah, thank you. I met Fidel for the first time tonight. I appreciate staff coming out, and I want to congratulate the board on picking what seems to be a very fine choice. I'm very excited to work with them in the transition for whatever amount of time that takes. And, Fidel has already mentioned, and this will come as no surprise to any of you, that several members of the community have already reached out to him. I'm really glad about that. I would encourage more people to do that, especially as he's new. As he says, he has a lot to learn, but he has a community that's welcoming him with open arms, which is great. We're seeing as a community COVID-19 kind of race through the community right now. This includes employees and vendors, and we just ask the public to please stay safe and also stay patient. We posted tonight or this afternoon that trash and recycling pickups have been delayed. JRM has had some pretty serious COVID-related absences. I have observed JRM drivers singly driving trucks and jumping out and doing the trash, which is not ideal. So just please bear with them. Leave your trash and your recycling up. It will be picked up. And as a reminder, next week is the Christmas tree curbside collection on your regular trash day. And then the compost center is open from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on January 15th. To follow up on some of Ann's remarks and Carlo's questions on the Board of Health, Town Council has marked up the draft motion, which was taken from another community recently. The circumstances have changed. Some of the laws have actually changed. So it was very important that Town Council review the draft motion. I'm glad the Board of Health thought to do that. I also want to especially congratulate Chair Dr. Rick Lopez, Health Director Ade Solarin, and Jackie Laverity from the Town Manager's Office. They spent several hours last week and this week organizing the meeting and preparing for the meeting, and it went off very well. I watched most of it last night. There was at one point over 100 in attendance. About 25 members of the public spoke. From what I could see, the conversations remained civil, even though they were strongly opinionated, and the meeting was not interrupted and the board was able to do its work. There's been headlines from some of our peer communities where basically disasters broke out and the boards had to adjourn or never start because of an unruly and unprepared meeting, basically. So I really want to congratulate the board for putting together a good meeting. I think with Karen's permission that we should invite the Board of Health and or the chair to a meeting, probably the next meeting, just to give an update for the community. We're in the post-holiday rush. We don't know what it's going to look like. We hope it slows down in 2 weeks. But there's a lot of things going on right now. As I mentioned to the board, I asked town hall employees in the second week of December to reinstitute the mask wearing policy except in private workspaces. I asked them to stagger their schedules and work remotely as is possible, as long as the customer service counters remained open. I believe the Board of Health will keep our buildings open and follow a similar approach that we should work safely but not close. Last Friday, we met as command staff with schools and others to talk about the upcoming test kits giveaway for teachers and for school staff. We planned an event for Sunday that ranged from a simple kit giveaway all the way to actually testing teachers if they were to show up in person. So we were well prepared to handle 900 folks that day. We got about almost 400, over 350 showed up, and it was fortunately just a testing kit giveaway, which was the simplest option. And I just want to thank all of the departments involved. We had about 25 town staff involved. And I really appreciate the president of the teachers union reaching out to both chiefs and myself afterwards and thanking us. We are all in the same family. It's really important that we support each other. And you know, we don't know how difficult it is to work in the schools right now, but we can imagine that the children are the most important asset of the town, and we really do appreciate the teachers trying to protect them as much as possible. We have placed orders for COVID-19 booster vaccinations as well as test kits. We are prepared to do a large-scale community event, but there is right now no supply. But I'll keep the board apprised if we're in position to do that. We'd certainly like to do it, especially test kits are very, very difficult to get right now. A couple communities that I'm aware of that have given them away have actually sold them. You know, should we be able to get our hands on them, I think we'll be in a position to give them away. So that's all I have. I know there's a long agenda, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
So, do you have a question?
Oh, no,
Okay.
I'm good, thanks.
Normally, we'd move on to public comment. We do have a nice empty room here, but Bob, I'll ask you if there's anybody on the line who would like to speak during public comment on Zoom.
There is no one that's indicated that. There's a couple members from the public, but I believe they're here probably for the budget discussion. So I don't believe there's any public discussion.
Okay. Okay, so we can move on to consent agenda.
Mark, if you want to read the first motion, I'll just kind of do them one at a time.
All right, just give me 1 second.
Oh, sorry, I can find them too.
No, I've got them here, just I have a lot of Word documents open. Okay, motions, here we go. Okay, number 1, move that the board designate the RMHS Fieldhouse to be the polling location for the special election on Tuesday, January 25th, 2022 for the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational Technical High School Building Project.
Thank you. I know the board is well aware of the circumstances, and again, this is a vocational school election. They set the hours, they pay for the election, but the board should set the polling location. So this motion is quite simple, just legally setting the polling location. We will advertise the election. The vocational school has done that as well. Certainly the town clerk expects a low turnout.
Yeah. Okay, any questions from board members? Okay,
Do you want me to read the second motion? Move forward that way?
I think so.
Okay. Move that the board declare the following material as surplus per Select Board Policy Article 1.6.8 surplus property. 1, 1995 Fire Department Ford Ambulance Cut Van, and 2, or item 2, 2005 Fire Department Ford Explorer.
Great. Any questions from the board? Nope. All right.
Move to approve the acceptance of a conservation restriction from Kevin and Kristen Riley to the town of Reading, acting by and through its Conservation Commission, over a portion of land located at 113 Arcadia Avenue, and to authorize town council to record said restriction and take any action related and necessary thereto.
I do have one question, and hopefully, I could have asked it earlier and I forgot. And I see we have a couple of conservation members on the Zoom. The thing I didn't understand from the packet was, and I know this goes back a few years, what caused the owners to bring this forward to you?
Hi, this is Anika Scanlon.
Hi, Anika.
If I could just jump in, I'm Anika Scanlon, Chair of Conservation. This conservation restriction was previously arranged with the property owner, and it's gone through a variety of revisions and approvals before conservation, and conservation has signed on it, and now it's kind of in the final approval stages for the select board.
For clarity's sake, was this related to permissions that the homeowner was seeking, or maybe just a lower tax burden? Just what was the genesis of this request?
Bear with me, I don't quite remember, I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
I'm not 100% sure what the impetus was on the property owner, except they saw it as worth their while enough to go through the process, and we welcome that.
Okay. Very good. I was satisfied with the explanation otherwise and the merit, so thank you.
Karen, Joe Carnahan had her hand raised.
Sure. Hi, Joe.
You just said that your curiosity was satisfied, but for the record, this property is right next to the Arizona River, so I actually wasn't on the Conservation Commission at the time this agreement was initiated, but I'm guessing that probably some sort of variance was required given the proximity to the river. But then, offering the town a conservation restriction is certainly advances the public interest and is sort of, probably what's connected with that variance there.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Okay, so are we ready for, how does this work?
So we probably should now make a motion on the entire consent agenda, get a second, and then take a vote. That's
Okay.
what I would recommend.
Okay. So moved.
So, second.
Very good. Okay, any discussion on the consent agenda items? Seeing none. Carlo?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And Karen, yes. 5-0. Very good. Thank you. Okay, and I see Ivrea on the Zoom. So our next agenda would be a discussion of the mediation process related to open meeting law complaints by Mr. Tubal. Hi, Ivrea. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Yeah, and I apologize for missing the beginning of the meeting. I had an emergency, so I assume that the contract was approved.
Yes,
And
it's
signed.
signed. It's signed. What do you want us
That's
to do
so
with this?
wonderful. I look forward to working with Vidal.
Oh, he's in the room too. Yep. He's here.
Great.
He's signed.
Oh, hi, sorry. So as the select board may have seen, there was a communication from the AG's office this afternoon kind of calling off the mediation based upon communications from Walt Hubble. So at this point, the select board needs to respond to the outstanding open meeting law complaints. We have 10 business days to do that, with the holiday on the 17th. That puts us at January 19th as the date to respond to all the open meeting law complaints. So what I would advise is that my office move forward and prepare draft responses for this board to consider at its meeting on the 18th. And then we can make any necessary changes and get them off in time on the 19th to Mr. Tubble.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, comments from board members? Chris?
Thanks, Karen. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, just in the last 2 weeks, the attacks against Ivrea, the Attorney General, the mediator, and the superintendent in this entire process. And especially, most recently, once again against me and my daughter, with him trying to get access to her student records, and that's why I went after the superintendent. I believe nobody in this town should be entitled to any child's records like that. It's absolutely disgusting what I'm seeing. And having said that, I was still willing to go through this mediation because that's why I'm here. So I don't know what to say at this point. I really was hoping to just put a period and move on with this, but now it seems like it's just going to go in a different direction. But everything against all of you guys and everyone else in this town is completely unwarranted. And it's just disgusting to me. That's all I got.
Other board members? Okay. I'll say I'm disappointed that the mediation process didn't work. You know, I'm glad we tried it. That I think was worth an effort, and I would say that I would be in favor of Ivrea at this point, just responding to complaints on our behalf and taking it up on our January 18th meeting.
So she would draft responses
Yeah.
for review.
Yeah.
Right, so at this point, I'm not looking for authorization to send any responses. That's not on this agenda. So
Yeah.
I think we can add that to the 18th agenda. I can just go off, prepare draft responses for the board's consideration. Just wanted to briefly mention that in the eyes of the Attorney General, they believe that the Reading Select Board acted reasonably and in good faith during this process. So I just wanted to make sure that all the board members here understand that your efforts were seen and heard by the Attorney General's office.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so,
I have a question.
yep, Carlo?
Thanks. To Ivrea, sorry. Ivrea, at what point is this considered harassment? Given the emails, the attacks that Chris mentioned, I mean, how much of this do we have to endure? As a board, personal attacks, I mean, at what point can something be done? As Chris said, when is this gonna end?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there isn't a clear answer to that, Carlo. The Attorney General Division of Open Government revised their regs to try to address repeat complainants by creating this mediation process. And as you can see, it just didn't work here. And then under the public records law, there is a similar process for seeking relief from specific requests that appear to be targeted or harassing. So we can explore those options, and I know Bob, Matt, Bob and I have already sat down and had those discussions, so we can kind of go through it. But unfortunately, to some extent, as an elected official, individuals have the ability to express their views, and there's not a lot that we can do.
Even if he's, even with personal attacks, accusations that aren't true.
As a municipality, there's not a lot that we can do. Individuals can explore other options, but as town council, there isn't a lot we can do as a municipality. We have these tools under the public records law and the open meeting law, and we can explore utilizing those. But I have to say, speaking frankly, we haven't had a lot of success using the harassment provisions under the public records law in some of my other communities. The tolerance that the supervisor of public records has is pretty high, and so we haven't seen that provision to be giving communities much relief.
Okay. That's sad, thanks.
If I could just follow up, thanks, Karen. For me, I'm perfectly fine with just being criticized and attacked or whatever. No big deal. But going after my daughter's student records still to this day and pushing back against the superintendent that would not give them to him is completely uncalled for. For me and any other child in this town, the United States for that matter. Completely uncalled for. Like, feel free to criticize me. I deal with it all the time. It's just, that kind of behavior is disgusting, and it's costing the town money because of it, which is rather unfortunate that we just have to keep continuing down this road where we're just gonna have to keep unfortunately paying attorney fees and all that stuff, just because of it. I just want whatever is gonna make this go away for the cheapest amount possible. So if it's Ivrea filing all this stuff on our behalf and it takes her an hour less, I'm all for the hour less. So I should probably stop talking and we'll go from
So
there.
it sounds like you're in favor of
I am
also
in
preparing
favor of
responses
putting
for
a
us?
period and moving on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can agree with that. I'd like to move beyond this. Okay, do you need us to vote? Do we have a motion or is this good enough?
I don't think we need a vote, do we?
This is good enough. The board will formally vote at its next meeting to authorize my office to send out the actual responses. But at this point, I'll go off, prepare drafts, and we can discuss it at your next meeting.
Thank you.
But it may be worth, if I
Yeah.
could, just, look, this is, we're all here volunteering our time and working for the good of the town. And it's very difficult, as Chris has said, as Carlos said, to get harangued. Just isn't right. Period.
Okay, moving on then. All right, thank you everyone. We look forward to that. You have fun.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Ivrea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will move directly to FY23 budgets since the folks at the Common District Meeting House are unable to join us this evening. Do we want to proactively reach out to them and try to get them on another meeting or?
Yes, yeah, I think we should.
Okay, Bob, did you reach out or someone on the staff reach out to them before about tonight? Go ahead.
Yeah, they were ready to come tonight until this morning.
Sure.
Between the owner and his attorney, there's been some positive COVID tests and
Yep.
Not feeling at all well. So we hope they get better. I believe their intention, health willing, is to try to summarize in writing for the board's benefit a progress report, and then they're more than welcome to attend when they're able to a future meeting. So they know your next meeting is the 18th, and so on, but they thought since they couldn't make it tonight, their attorney offered that perhaps a summary in writing would help the board.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think that would be great to
Yep.
get the summary in writing. I think, from my perspective, I was looking to open up a channel of communication with them because it seemed to have closed or stopped. So that would be a great start. And then we can talk about where to go from there, in my opinion.
I was also noting that's not the only business that's due to go in that building that was announced that hasn't happened. Have we had any communications with the property owner? As far as you know, Bob, are there any holdups, outstanding in the inspections department or anything like that? I don't know what, the entire building's empty, all of the commercial spaces.
There are no holdups from the town's perspective.
Okay.
There was an issue with the size of the parking spaces in the parking garage. I don't know that that's been resolved, but that really was residential, not commercial.
Could I piggyback on this? Bob, in your note to the board that's in the packet, you talked about a request for night meetings, and I know we haven't talked about that yet. Would now be a time to talk about that, or what are your thoughts?
Are you going off agenda? Are you trying to get us in trouble?
I'm on it. It's in his report, and
I
it's
can
just the
address-
town
Okay,
manager.
I can address that, Mark.
Okay, you have a
Board of
follow-up
Health.
question to the town manager's report, got it, okay.
Yeah, the Board of Health is gonna take that up Thursday night, Mark.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
All right, well, it'd be nice to see that building fully functional. I know the residents are all moved in, and it'd be nice to see the businesses opening up as soon as possible as well. Okay, so are we ready for FY23 budgets? Ready. Okay, Bob, says town manager overview first.
See if I can share a screen. Can folks see the spreadsheet okay?
Not really, but I have it on my computer.
Okay, that's better.
Is okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
So this was a list of items presented to the board since your last meeting that were $10,000 and higher. This top section was presented to the board by me. Some other additional items came in subsequently. And then even this week, a couple of items came in, I think yesterday or maybe this morning, from the Historical Commission. Many members ranked them. 3 members ranked them 1 to 18, including the top and bottom sections. I'm sorry, 2 did that. Carlo ranked the first set. He was then traveling and he made comments on the last ones. Chris thought 3 items were okay and ranked the rest equally not okay, I guess I'll say. And Karen thought there wasn't enough information. And just for the board's amusement, I guess, I ranked them as well. But I have to tell you, having been through this many years, capital plans and operating budgets change quickly, and your thoughts change quickly. So when I'm going through a budget process, I learn things, I listen to things, and my opinions shift. I have a certain set of principles I use, but if I had done this ranking 3-4 weeks ago, I'm sure it'd be slightly different than it was today. So typically in the past, the board has then had a discussion about all the items, had a discussion among itself what it agrees with. I tried to highlight by green the top 4 choices, which is kind of our tradition, because the board can often come up with things, which certainly here are in common, things they agreed with. And then just try to talk through the process. And again, to give a background, I wish we could spend most of this, most money on and have most of these items, but we can't. I have made some preliminary cuts that I've really not talked through with all the staff in trying to give more money to these items. But right now, there's only about $50,000 in round numbers to fund what's on this list. It's not very much.
Wow.
And again, I will come up with, I have mentioned to the board that I'd like to add more money to the results of the pay and class study so that Fidel could, be a little more effective in implementing whatever the results are. We started with 50,000. I would like to add another 50,000. That means that in addition to the items you see in front of you, I need to cut 50,000 plus other things to help you out with this list. And I have not succeeded in cutting significantly more than that yet. This is a tough budget, and I'm not complaining because it's a great, healthy budget. But we're at a time, partly pandemic related, and the needs of the organization are great. The needs and wants of the community are high. And again, this is a far better discussion than what do we want to cut. But this is not going to be easy. And I certainly welcome feedback from the board.
Bob, you and I had a quick discussion. Thank you for putting the Historical Commission items on there. What's difficult about this is a lot of these are staffing positions, which has a long-term implication on the budget, certainly. A number of these things are one-offs, are investments, if you will. So it's a little tricky. I see them differently. I in my own mind, we need to consider adding staff carefully. We have added a number of positions recently, so, I know the community's kind of going to sit up that. But some other areas we really have not been investing in, and those are more of the one-offs. So I'm struggling with how do things get funded. I was thinking about this today. For example, the Historical Commission and the Conservation Commission are both established advisory committees, backed by state law. And they've made some rather modest requests in the grand scheme of things compared to what we do normally. At the same time, we created a new committee called the Park Committee, and they were able to, for the right reasons, go ahead and spend money on postcards, a couple of postcards, and in addition to staff time. And that didn't go through a budget process, and it was, I have to guess, it was probably on the order of magnitude as the Conservation Commission and the Historical Commission. So what I'm struggling with is that how are these smaller things getting funded? Because these are not $1 million asks, these aren't $2 million asks. So how can we, and we have a really healthy CAS budget, and we also have some wonderful funding from the federal government coming, and there will be grant programs. So how do we make small incremental progress, even aside for making decisions about staffing?
I have a suggestion. I agree with a lot or maybe everything that Karen just said. There needs to be, I guess I'll say, better organization to the financial request process from volunteer boards. I think I wrote to you and suggested that perhaps in early fall, September, would be a good time for the board to ask volunteer committees for funding requests that are budget requests. Many or most of these nighttime committees are staffed with town staff. Historical is not one of them, so it's an exception. And, I will tell you that some of these studies have gone through discussions at public meetings. Staff was aware and staff told me, but some have not. There definitely needs to be a better process. And like you, Karen, I divide the requests pretty much into two parts, maybe three. One of them is it's a one-time request of any size. That's quite different than an ongoing request. So I will suggest, especially for this year, that all of the one-time requests be dumped in Fidel's lap and presumably go to April town meeting as a request. There's plenty of free cash. Let's go. And certainly, as an example, the board in majority supported the economic development, or I should really call it the housing production plan, as a way to preserve our exemption from adverse 40Bs, and I agreed with that. That's about a $50,000 request that would be exceptionally difficult to fund in the Fy23 budget. But as it turns out, the deadline is February next year, a year from now. And funding it in July may not be fast enough. So I would very much urge and support this going to April town meeting as a request, and let's get going. So that's just one example. You asked some other questions that are somewhat difficult, and there's really no process for better or worse. The park group and the Human Relations Advisory Committee, or at least the chair, came to me and asked for small amounts of money. The town manager does have historically between 10 and 20,000, more recently more than that for COVID, of, I'll say, discretionary funds to be used mostly for boards and committees and for things that weren't planned in the annual budget. So it's fairly simple for me to fund, $1,000 or $2,000 items. I have just committed $6,000 roughly to a day to purchase some test kits. He came up with $3,000, so we put it together. I think that process and the history of the town manager's reserve fund is pretty good. It's certainly publicly available and easy to see. Historical, as an example, again, perhaps because they're not staffed fully. That's the first I saw of any of those three requests was the email. I think it was from Carlo maybe this week. If that had come in last fall and $1,000 item, that's then easy to do out of the town manager's reserve fund, if that's what it was. Same with some of the conservation requests if they're one time. This time of year, the town manager's reserve fund tends to have been at least partly spent down. Now, the next town manager could develop probably a better organized process for this and go to November town meeting and April town meeting and ask for more funds when there's a lot of demands. But the town manager reserve fund has been a small version of the FinCom reserve fund, which has much more rules and regulations about it. The town managers can be done more easily. And if I'm happy to provide the board, and I have in the past expenditures. There are things like the garden club will do signs for Adopt an Island. People will put out signs on the common advertising an event. It's generally small dollar figures.
Bob, can I ask?
$100 there, $100 there.
Bob,
So,
we had a grant, we got MAPC to help us with the green communities. That was about $10,000. Was that something that came out of the town manager's reserve fund, or where did that come from?
no, that was, as you say, that was a grant. So there was no town funds in that.
I think the initial consulting work, I don't believe the initial consulting work was, it was an investment. It was an investment. I just don't know how it was
Jean and her
funded.
department has some line items for outsourced, professional, consulting work.
Okay,
So it's quite possible that either she or through Erin's, lines have funded some work like that.
gotcha.
The town manager's fund generally does not do things like that. It's not big enough.
Bob, the community paradigm was paid by way of the town manager reserve, is that right?
Not yet. That's,
Okay,
we have enough money in Matt's budget generically,
okay,
but that will have to go to April town meeting for a budget transfer most likely.
okay.
We also had a public safety promotion process that was not budgeted, that was less costly, but that probably will need to go to April town meeting for funding.
Okay.
The other thing that the town manager's reserve fund cannot do and will never do is pay any wages. It must be an expense. And a majority of the money over a longer period of time is for volunteer efforts. But I would say, COVID aside, you know, the upper limit has traditionally been a couple $1,000 for any one request. You know, COVID, we did do some bigger amounts, such as a day's test kit.
Chris?
Thanks, Karen.
So yeah, many of these items, and I indicated in the write-up what they are, many of these items, which may receive a variety of support from you, from FinCom, and from ultimately town meeting, can go to April town meeting as one-time requests.
So Bob, is there a cap on the town manager reserves fund? Like, can we just authorize at town meeting, you get $2 million? And then you can just do all this stuff, or like, it seems like a loophole, or is there a cap
You
on
probably need a
this?
balanced budget though.
There's definitely a cap. I think it's historically and recently been about 15,000, and it was increased, as was the FinCom reserves during COVID. I'm going to suggest that you see it's one of the items here, town manager reserves. I'm going to suggest it be cut back to prior levels. Nothing against Fidel, but you know, if COVID doesn't abate, I may not do that. But this increase of 10,000 to make it 30,000, I don't think is warranted.
So not 2 million,
It's never been more than about 25,000.
not 2 million, all right, well. I guess, yeah, the way that,
I don't think town meeting would look too favorably on kind of no checks and balances on that amount of money.
all right, $1.5 million then.
It feels like there are a couple of things that are not set up quite yet. One is a way to get these committees to be able to share their needs in a very timely fashion. So if they do have a particular need or a project or an idea, to find a way to kind of bring that forth earlier in the budget process, as you were saying. So that's kind of piece number one. And then piece number two, it almost feels like when the requests are $1,000 or $2,000, when they're very modest, maybe it's either town manager reserves, or there's some type of activity when we decide how much free cash to use that allows up to X for committee priorities or something like that, so that there's a small funding mechanism in place. I think that if it's $1,000 or $2,000, that kind of range per committee, that seems pretty reasonable. I think when you see, you know, $7,800, $10,000, things like that, those are different. Those probably need to be called out and discussed more thoroughly. Maybe that's just a thought on how to manage those a little bit also.
If I might, Mark, I agree with a lot of that. And historically, some of the committees, all of the committees are theoretically asked by staff on a regular basis at the beginning of their fiscal year. So let's say late summer, early fall, you know, what financial needs do you foresee? And some of them you're highly aware of. The town forest with some of the projects they're doing there, you know, is kind of a well-developed discussion. There is some regular funding now for 3 committees that I can think of right off the top of my head. Trails Committee, Town Forest Committee, and Historical Committee. And it's not a lot of money. It's like $1,000 or $2,000 as line items. I did discuss with staff in the past whether we should try to consolidate that. And they thought that at least those 3 committees much preferred to have their own line that they knew they could spend. So I would encourage the board to develop a process where all of your boards have a conversation and get a little bit better organized about it. Again, historically, some of the requests I'm seeing this year have just not happened in the past. And maybe they should have, and maybe somehow we needed a mechanism to encourage it, or they're just new things, I can't say. But I agree with you that a process, especially early in the fall, would be better for all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure, like, they're here, the committees for these kind of examples, the community garden, you know, they're coming in now, but they would still be outlined as, they'd still be on this list if they came in September, or if they came in December, if they came in now. You know, earlier is better, and so clearly there's a request that if we can't get them funded this year, they're already teed up for next year, and you know, it's possible that some grant opportunities would come along in the meantime, or I completely agree. There needs to be, and maybe COVID has slowed down requests the past couple of years, but there needs to be a process for committees to ask for help. So let me use the Climate Advisory Committee. There's a huge presentation in our packet. They have been working really hard to talk about and educate us about the sustainability director. And again, that's a staff position, so it's a different discussion, but they've been coming at us since August, I think, so I guess that's my only comment for the moment. Ann?
So, you know, if we put aside, Bob, all of the items you would consider one-time expenses, how, you know, how much, what is the volume of requests remaining? You know, if one-time expenses we could be looking at a free cash allocation from town meeting. Because I know you'd said there's about $50,000 to spend. Does that, so would that be, if you take away everything that's a one-time expense, potentially you would still have $50,000 to spend? Because I don't know that when I did this ranking, I was really thinking of it as like, okay, there's $50,000 to, and in fact, I was not thinking of it, there's $50,000 to go around. Here's my ranking as to how I want that spent. And I think in my message to you, when I returned the survey, was that I'd prefer that we make progress towards all of these priorities versus, you know, fund, you know, just a handful at the full amount. But I don't know if that's possible, given $50,000, that doesn't sound like we're going to be able to make progress on 18 priorities. So what do you think is possible here?
Ann, I don't know how well this shows up, but I've tried to highlight 3 things that are clearly one time, and I apologize. I know Anika sent something a couple hours ago, and she might be able to add to this, but
okay.
The housing production plan for $45,000, the economic development action plan for $30,000, and the reason it said $50,000, Mark asked, is we believe we can get $20,000 of a grant.
Okay.
And the outsourced records management for a day are clearly one-time requests, and all could go to April town meeting. I will say the economic development action plan is not nearly as urgent as the housing production plan. Mm-hmm. And I know some of these requests below, and I apologize, I don't remember from her email recently which ones, but 1 or 2 of these conservation requests were considered one time.
Okay.
And I just don't know about historical. I wasn't sure.
Okay.
So it's about 100,000 plus a little bit more possibly, and that are one time.
Okay.
So it doesn't solve the problem, but at least it gives an avenue for funding for those.
So it's possible that those highlighted plus some other in conservation could be funded by way of free cash should town meeting so approve, but for those remaining, there's just $50,000 to go around.
And that's about right accurate, yeah.
Okay.
I would also say that the earmark funds from the legislature is about to happen again. So the good thing about this is we now have a list of projects that we can submit. We got $100,000 last year just by asking.
Right.
So by even the boards and committees going through, and the staff going through this exercise, we now have a full range of things that we could potentially match against earmark funding.
Good point.
Yeah, if I may, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say this for Fidel's benefit, we do have a process for this. We did develop a list for $100,000, working again through staff, and that includes the school department, reaching out to their boards and committees. I will say that the community garden went outside that process and went to the legislators directly, who then came to me and said, what do we do? You know, that's not helpful for the situation, because as Karen has identified, at least to me, $10,000 grant they got is not nearly sufficient for what the real expense will be. So again, I'd urge the board to develop a process for its boards and committees, and just have something kind of go through you. You know, you probably should be the gatekeeper.
Do we need a line item, Bob?
That's possible. Again, I had talked about putting in a board, committee, commission funding line. And that would give you some means to then, you know, have the requests come to you. So that's one possibility. But again, staff said that the existing boards that had such lines didn't wish to give those up, even though they're small amounts. And Karen, I don't know if you can see, Anika has her hand raised.
Oh, no, I can't see it, so I'd love to recognize her if that's okay with the board.
Of course.
Hey, thank you, everybody. Thanks for recognizing me and for sharing this information. So, yeah, I did send a memo last minute before the meeting. It's more reiteration of what you're seeing already in Bob's spreadsheet, a little bit of additional explanation. And part of the reason why I put this memo together was to provide a little bit more justification, because in my experience on conservation, so we're going on, yeah, I'm dating myself, but 15 years, there really has not been a mechanism to start that conversation about budgeting. And so when it comes to supporting Eagle Scout projects, supporting trail construction, doing some invasive plant management. It's basically been done with free labor from very enthusiastic and fantastic volunteers. And fundraising by Eagle Scouts. I mean, there have been a dozen times we've wanted to use some sort of conservation fund to support Eagle Scout projects, which benefits the whole town. So really, sort of the process has not been in place. So I just wanted to emphasize, yes, that Bear Meadow line item, that is a one-time item. Those other items suggested, items 14 and 15, those are just to be able to support conservation action and land management. So really, we're operating with no budget. I mean, we have staff and that's fantastic and we appreciate that. You know, and we have the town hall for space and we have the resources through our CTV, you know, so anything we can get in terms of resources is of course greatly appreciated. But, you know, just for consideration, we're required to manage, you know, over 900 acres of conservation land with no land management budget. And, you know, we've been working on a shoestring begging people for help for a long time. So I think I think there needs to be a process in here to support the boards. We have no funding source except for town money. Because all the fees we collect, I believe, go into the general fund. So, I just want to speak up for conservation and, let you guys know that, all the financial matters, we would discuss in a public meeting and vote on in a public meeting so that everything's transparent and everybody can see how the money's getting used and that it's getting used appropriately. Thank you.
Mark?
Just a quick follow-up to what Anika was saying. If there are any sort of substantial fees coming from, let's say, conservation here, could we just establish a revolving fund?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, we can hear you now.
we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there is one.
Oh, there is? How much is
Yeah,
it?
I don't know the ins and outs, Anika will, but I know, for instance, some of Chuck's salary is offset every year by the revolving fund. And that's a vote of conscom. I don't know what the lawful expenses are from the fund. I couldn't begin to guess.
So maybe, so that as a town meeting issue, maybe land management kinds of issues could be a validated expenditure from that revolving fund. Up to a certain amount, obviously. A little bit.
I just don't know, Mark. Maybe Anika knows.
I would have to double check that because I believe we've asked around at a number of meetings to use that money for conservation, trail management, kiosks, invasive plant management, donation towards supplies for trail construction and all that. That use of that money's been disallowed. So we have discussed a number of different ways to work some sort of operating potential out of the budgets we do have. But that allocation to Chuck's salary is a one-time a year public vote offset. And I think that's the only thing that's allowed for, although I'm not 100% sure. So,
Anika, let me ask you a question because there's two solutions. I think your revolving fund is kind of following state law, if you will. It's not a local decision. So the town accountant is probably following state law, but I believe, and I'm speaking as a guest here, I believe that town meeting would set up something for you that is under local control that would be able to address some of your concerns. So perhaps that's something that should be explored. And again, I'm not saying that I know it can, and I'm not saying that I know that your fees could go in there, but it certainly should be looked into. And Karen, Joe has his hand up.
Oh, I'd love to recognize Joe.
Sure. Where do I find the lower hand here? Oh, there we go. So I have an unfair advantage over Anika that I joined the commission much more recently, which means I've read the bylaws relevant to the commission much more recently. And so I was actually able to pull it up where it's section 6.5.1 of the Reading General Bylaw, if you want to look it up. It does say that funds in the Conservation Commission consulting fee or revolving fund can only be used for consulting and engineering services for the review of designs and engineering work. And so basically people, as I understand it, and the 6.5 cites MGL chapter 44. So there's a state law, exactly as Bob said, that I think dictates the restrictions on how the conservation revolving fund can be used. So basically people give us fees in order to, with their application, and then we can spend those fees in order to perform the investigations necessary to evaluate their application and approve it. But not for other conservation purposes, such as the land management purpose. So there we are.
Thank you. That makes sense.
So maybe we could explore if there is an opportunity to create kind of a local version utilizing some of those funds as a separate revolving fund. And even if it was set up as a very modest amount, it would at least allow for some land management function. Maybe it's something we can ask, so it sounds like, I was going to say Sharon, but it sounds like it's more an Ivrea question.
Yeah, and for the smaller dollar figures that they're presenting, there's no particular reason that either myself or the next town manager couldn't include that as annual line items. Not go through the larger process, but once you do get into, I'll just say above 5 or 10,000, that does become more difficult to sustain. You want to make sure that, if you put it out there, it can be sustained.
I think, Karen, your point was spot on just a moment ago too, which is that, hey, why don't we, now that we have these projects, we know what they are, why don't we apply for some state funding right away? And see if we can get some of that.
Last year they gave us some guidance on what they want, what kind of projects they were looking for, so I'm kind of expecting the same thing, but I actually don't think they'll be that different than they were last year, so. Yeah, our delegation loves to hear from us. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. I just want to give my quick overview of why I voted the way that I ranked these. It's essentially because Bob just said, so I didn't know there was 50 grand. I thought we had to cut like 450 out of the budget. So it's essentially where I thought we couldn't afford any of this stuff, other than the outsourced records management that he already committed money to. So like, how can we not just do that since he's already doing it? And then 1,000 and 1,200 is just meaningless money in the grand scheme of things. But everything else, we have to be cutting other line items and whatnot. It just doesn't seem feasible. As much as I know the Office 365 license is a massive upgrade for the town, and it's going to make life, easier in the long run, and hours are shorter and everything. It's like an investment. It's just, we can't afford that. So I did reach out to Sharon to mention maybe we can use ARPA funding on that line item. But once again, it is an annual fee, and I asked Bob just to find out what the 50 grand is entailing, because that's a large figure for just Office 365.
Is that an annual fee? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying? So it's a
Yeah.
recurring fee?
Yep,
It's not
so
just a one-off?
ARPA might be able to be used on the 50 grand for the 5 years, but then beyond that, we'll have to. But in 2028, we might all be
Oh, I
flying
thought
vehicles.
that was
by
a
then.
one-off, so I appreciate
No,
you
that's-
asking that question.
Yeah, so that's an ongoing thing.
Got it.
And then the historical that just got added. So the photo map digitization, is that like the software is down below it for the grand and then it's 7,500 for someone to do it? Or, because to me, that just seems like some high school class where they can digitize all the stuff for us, learn about all the buildings, and it just becomes like a class in itself, and then it costs us nothing, other than maybe the grand, if that's the case. So I guess if you have an answer, Bob.
So we got an email today, just coming in today, under temporary archivist. It just says, we can ask for follow-up. It says to sort, catalog, and store documents, books, and photographs in the town archive collection for 250 hours at $20 an hour. So yeah, I don't know if that is like a grad student or what that is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not somebody that knows what they're doing, but it's probably not a 7th grader.
No, I'd go with the high school for this.
Let's see. Mark.
So, a couple of sets of comments, maybe. One, just to respond, Chris, on ARPA funds and things. I hope that we're going to be thinking about ARPA funds as a way to kind of pay for our priorities. It's another kind of pile of cash that we get to use, and to make sure that we kind of hit our priorities with it. Now, not just say, hey, let's just save it for 2 big projects, but also to be careful that we don't kind of just let 5, 10, 50 float out to 10 projects, and suddenly we say, oops. I think we should be really careful about that. Second is, I think, another cut I was taking at this, I was thinking about which of these projects can actually have a return that comes back with them specifically. So for example, the increased parking enforcement hours. So the reason that we would do that, I think, is number one, to kind of reinforce what we're trying to say to folks about the parking restrictions and employee parking and other things. But also, if folks aren't compliant, that'll bring in revenue. And so as I looked at, it's $18,000 for the hours, but I'm assuming they're going to be writing a lot of tickets for a while. And it's kind of doing what we want. In the short term, maybe it generates revenue. In the long term, maybe we don't need those hours anymore. So I thought that was kind of interesting. On the sustainability director, my concern was, again, it's a full-time person, and I'm not ready to sign up for that. But to the extent that that person can kind of pay for themselves, then it gets much more interesting. And I don't think it's kind of step into a full-time role, but I think it may be an opportunity to find, hey, can we offset expense with money savings or grants brought in? And certainly with, green communities being a piece of that. But just kind of how do we think that through? How do we find a way where some of these expenses, there's an offset somewhere that comes with it? And which ones would that fit for? And again, parking enforcement to me was the biggest one that kind of said, ooh, this is what we're trying to do anyway.
Is the parking enforcement a new hire, or is that just more hours?
It's more hours.
Okay, and that's, so, that could be, that doesn't have to be forever. That can be, we can do that for this year, we can see how it goes. We can do it for another year. At some point down the road, if Parker PTTF says we have a better solution. So, okay, thank you.
Add something to that. Thanks, Karen. I believe we were also talking about kiosk as well in the park thing. So that is another potential 4 that, I don't know what the figure is, $5,000 each or something. So that's 20 grand that is gonna have to be created out of something as well. So it just compounds onto things. But once again, that would pay for itself technically, dependent upon how many people wanna stay at CBS for 6 hours.
Great.
Karen David Zeke has his hand raised.
Sure, that would be great. I have a question for him.
You want to ask your question
No,
first?
go ahead. No, you chime in first.
Well, so I'm kind of responding to Mark's comment, of course, about the sustainability director, and you have a presentation in your packet, and I think one of the key messages in that presentation from the experience, I showed you some slides there from the experience in Natick, of their director of sustainability there, of Melrose, and of a study that Neil Duffy did when he was at UMass Boston. You remember Neil Duffy? He's actually our guy for green communities, right? Be showing like 3, 4, and 5x returns on an annual basis for the cost of that position. There's no reason really to have a sustainability director. I think the way we're thinking about it right now, if it doesn't pay for itself, and we should expect that it does. So in fact, I have some trouble with the list that you're working against, because I don't really see it as a cost as such, because it's intended to get the grants for the town. So it's not the same thing as another assistant HR director or something, which has a service for the town, but is a cost and is not a revenue generator.
Yeah.
This is about money coming in, and so if Mark, if your metric is return, this is the return line item on this list, and I think is justified for that reason. And I think that to take it one step further, there's another slide in there that shows all the different organizations that Gillian Wilson Martin and Natick deals with. A bunch of different organizations, not only in the town, not only in the committees of Natick and the departments of the town, but dealing with the community, the business and residents, and dealing with the various organizations in the government, Massachusetts government. There are a large number of relationships and connections that have to be made in this process. So any attempt on our part to dole this effort out a piecemeal, a little bit to this person, a little bit to that person, just creates chaos and lack of coordination. So I think this is bringing things together that I wouldn't even be recommending this if I thought this was somebody who is simply going to draw a salary and not be able to pay for themselves. So I think the experience shows that it does and can pay for itself. I was looking at in our MVP projects, back in 2020, we did a workshop on identifying things that we might do under the MVP program. That project came up with 49 urgent needs in Reading. So I was looking at the projects today. What is MVP funding? Well, their fiscal year 22 budget is about $20 million, and they made 66 grants ranging from $23,000 to $2 million. In fact, there were $2 million grants. So that's a whole nother source of money that MVP by itself could pay if we could get any one of those grants, which the median, I don't remember, because the median was about $170,000. Any one grant from MVP would pay for this position, and that doesn't count anything we would get through Green Communities, and it doesn't count anything that we would ask grant for and manage through ARPA. So I think we need to look at this a little differently from just another cost to be borne by the budget.
David, so I'm in agreement with the first part, and I read through the presentations and appreciate the work that went in and thinking about kind of how to do it. That said, for me, the hurdle for adding an FTE is much higher than anything else. And I would very much, I love the idea, I love the justification, I love the notion of it bringing in 2, 3, 4x its cost. I think that's all correct. I'd love to see us walk through that as opposed to run. And I don't think I'm not ready to run into it. So that was my reasoning on it. So I'm agreeing with you, except I'm not ready to add an FTE. So that's kind of how I was thinking about that one. I think we can see that in other categories also. The PEO is a good example, the parking enforcement, where not adding an FTE, it's variable. It does, I believe, have a strong return, different, but a strong return. That one is very palatable to me, kind of right away. An FTE is just not right now. It's just going to take more time to get me over that hurdle. And if we can do that, even piecemealing it or part-timing, I actually think that's the right way to walk into this. So anyway, so the point I was trying to make was more kind of how do we decide what to do based on this? I think Bob's point about, hey, what if we think about having this process and fund? I think that makes good sense for the committees that kind of don't otherwise have a voice. I think we should look into conservation and setting up a different, probably, revolving fund for some land management kinds of activities, or somehow separately line item that. I think that makes great sense. I think that the smaller ones will work beautifully that way. The trouble we're going to have is with the big ones here, and we're going to have to just sequence them when we can do them.
Good.
Go ahead. Yeah, so Bob, I'd ask if we could sort of, as a board, maybe get back to you with to a question of, if you had $50,000 to spend and could spend it, how would you spend it among these priorities? And maybe we could provide you with input on that, because I don't think that's not what I did in my ranking. So with that lens, I'd kind of like to reconsider what I'd previously submitted. Or at least I don't know if other board members feel similar. It actually sounds like Chris kind of already took that approach, looked at like, okay, we have a very limited pot, and this is how I would spend it based on what has basically already been allocated in other small dollar items. So
I like that approach. Could I make a friendly amendment?
Sure,
We were
sure.
talking about $100,000 for Stroud Avenue, and we didn't even know what that was gonna entail. Could we make it $100,000 for a budget of $109 million? Well, and again, it's still focused on one-offs.
well, don't we to have a balanced budget? Don't we only have 50 grand remaining? But maybe we take these one-time expenses. We could, certainly express an interest in other one-time expenses being funded out of free cash, but otherwise, I think we only have $50,000.
So Bob does the magic, I'm focused on like, what are our priorities? And I'm, Bob figures out how we pay for it, because we have a big cash budget, and we have a budget, we have a big free cash bucket. I like your idea. We have to set priorities, we have to give priorities.
So are you saying like if we each tell Bob our top $100,000 worth of priorities, then he can take that and identify from that the board's collective top 50 grand worth?
I just think if outsourced records management costs 30,000, 50,000 is not gonna do anything. But I also, I have my hat on that you're talking about like one-off items, right? Because
Well,
that doesn't,
that's sort of separate, that I'm thinking the
Okay.
one-off
Yeah,
items
okay.
are separate from the 50,000. Or potentially could be separate from the 50,000.
good.
Thanks, Karen. I guess I have the luxury of not having to change any of my stuff, but for me, if it's 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, we still have to pay for it. It's still coming from somewhere, so
Yes,
it doesn't
it comes
matter.
from free cash. I mean, we're sitting on millions we're way above our financial we have money. We
But we don't
can't,
wanna, I think we don't wanna use free cash to fund operations that
No,
are not
absolutely not.
one-time unexpected expenses.
exactly. So I think if we go back home and we add all that
Like, we
stuff
certainly
up,
wouldn't wanna use free cash to fund an FTE, for example, like that would not
Yep.
be smart budgeting.
correct.
So can I make a friendly amendment
Yeah,
to the
sure,
friendly amendment?
Sure,
Yeah.
150, 500 what?
No, I think that the 100 is an interesting idea, focused on items that essentially are one-time, they're not FTE activities, and see how that plays out between the five of us, to
It's
see
just
kind of
like
where it comes in
a kind of a
to
line
establish
of-
toward the
Okay.
50. A lot of them just don't fit, right? So there's some of
Yeah.
them that are either over the top to start or whatever's there. Bob, of some of these budgets, like legal, other settlement, things like that, is that a maybe, or is that we're gonna have to spend that anyway?
Well, you can see on that specific one, I ranked it last because that's a what if it happens, so I wouldn't pay
Okay.
for it.
Great.
Okay.
Matt thought it was prudent since we actually had a settlement last year to just boost that number, which I totally understand.
Got it.
I think to answer some of your points or your questions or your comments, FinCom has given us guidance. They have decided how much free cash to use. So respectfully, that horse is back in the barn. Now, that doesn't mean you can't reopen it in March when FinCom meets. I don't have any strong opinion one way or the other whether the board creates a list of 50,000 or 100,000. There's going to be some amount we can afford and some amount we can't. As I said, I'm working to try to reduce other costs that were less than 10,000. And if I reduce a half a dozen of them and 3,000 each, all of a sudden I've created some funding. So if the board wants to give me more feedback, that's fine. But what I'd specifically ask you for is how would you spend however much money you want to decide on in the FY23 budget. So that's not as a one-time April town meeting request. Is assume it's an ongoing cost.
Okay.
How would you spend? And again, you can decide the number.
So
But I would ask you again, and we've been through this recently, I really need your feedback now. Because of the transition with Fidel, I've moved everything up. I'm working on things now I normally would wait to the end of the month. The budget process will have to move along.
So, but
So if
this
the board
list
wants to
includes,
get me answers by next week, that's fine. But if it takes another 3 weeks, that's just not gonna be working.
so Bob, this
working
thing
time.
includes one-offs though. This list is not just ongoing costs. Like we know now that Office 365, that's every year. We know staff, an HR director, that's every year. A sustainability directory, that's ongoing, that's every year. But we already have in this list a mix of one-offs and ongoing things. So I guess maybe I just need a better idea of where the line is.
Well, I've indicated out here that the housing production plan, the economic development action plan, records management, and Anika added the baseline study are one-time costs, so you shouldn't worry about those.
Okay,
Those
so then
can be
they shouldn't be in
handled in a
this
different
list
way.
then, huh?
But to be clear, although, Bob, I appreciate you said, you know, the board can certainly choose whether we come back to you with each of us our $100,000 worth of priorities or $50,000. The reality is that there are $50,000 to work with. Is that right?
Right now, 62,000.
62, okay.
Good job, man.
All right.
Keep talking.
If I keep talking, we'll go from 50 to 62 to
right
74.
There's 512,000 requests excluding historical, and we needed to remove 450,000 of those.
Okay. All right. I see that, thank you.
I think we could do it by next week, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, I appreciate this. This is definitely more clarification. Can I ask David a couple questions if he's still on?
I'm still here.
Okay, thanks, David. I really do appreciate all of the research you've done. I would love to, at this point, I'm not sure what you had in mind for walking us through it some more. But what we haven't done so far, so here's an example of the Climate Advisory Committee. No staff assigned specifically. They get a lot of help from Jean's group, from Julie. But you don't have an administrator. You don't have a sustainability administrator. So at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, David, so it's been the committee doing all this work, whereas if we're gonna really move forward and embrace a new way of doing things, we want staff input. And so that would be one thought, how might you do that? And I don't know that you have that answer, but the other question I had, in this presentation and in all of your research, have you seen other communities? How common or how likely are part-time sustainability directors, or would we be doing something new?
Well, you know, I think there are things to explore, like maybe sharing this with one of our neighbors or something like that. But I would say this: the communities that that are doing, if you're going to do part-time or you're going to go just lowball it, then you just give it a different kind of person. I mean, there are programs at Tufts and programs at Northeastern that graduate people that would probably be good fits, in terms of an academic background. But you're not going to get experience. One of the slides I have in here has, the different salaries of several organizations that are hiring sustainability directors, and there's actually been a fair amount of turnover. Like for example, the director from Arlington ended up went to Winchester.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of demand is what I'm saying. So I think it would almost be better to do a slightly delayed hire, but if you mean could we do like a half-time person? We could try that. I would rather do that than not do anything. I think the results will just be less, or we would end up leaning on other people in the planning organization more. My impression is that they're already very busy,
right?
And they're already doing a lot for us. And like Andrew did the MVP program, and Julie was doing the green communities efforts and so forth. I don't think there's a lot of excess time there for them. So
right.
I think it's a choice for sure. If you remember back to our conversation about green communities and our peer communities and what they did, some communities just apply for less money and get less money. That's certainly an option, right? It's a question of how aggressive we want to be and can be. But again, to say that, say, $90,000 comes out of a $50,000 bucket is kind of missing the point of the $90,000. If the $90,000 doesn't pay for itself, then we don't need that position. So that's not really answering your question, Karen. I guess my bottom line is I'd rather do a half-time person than no person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Me too.
David.
Thank you.
Karen. David, do we have an update on, are we going to become a green community? It seems as if this whole thing would be moot if this is ongoing for another 3 years. Like, I know it was briefly mentioned last time that we're like on the right track and legislative and all that, but do we have like an update on where that actually stands?
Does, Bob, you wanna give us a quick update?
Yeah, Julie did submit an application at the end of December in time. And it's, we've met every criteria except the legislation remedy needed, and I've heard no updates. I've heard our senator and one of our reps each propose different paths, but they're not in session. I've heard no updates. But if we applied, because if there is a solution, we wanted to be ready and have our application on hand so that it could be acted on.
And that's worth $160,000.
Yep.
The
Out of the bucket.
percentage where it's designated, right? And that's why I brought up the MVP projects too, because there's plenty of money in the MVP program for us to apply for.
Yep.
Even if we don't have even if it takes us longer to get to green communities. And we're talking about a position that doesn't, we wouldn't even be posting this position until next summer.
Yeah.
Right? So, it's not like we need the person now. If we're not a green community by June, that would be perfectly obvious to us what our situation is.
Could I ask David a question? I'm not sure I understand, David. We can take this offline if you'd rather, but when you're mentioning applying for grants, I assume that grants received are for work to be done. Am I missing something?
No. What do you mean? You mean that would not cover, not to cover salaries of employees? Is that correct?
Well, that's part of my question, but when we apply for grants, typically it's for something we want that we don't have funds for. So we want to do X and we apply for a grant and we get money for it.
Right.
When you're mentioning that, for instance, becoming a green community is worth $160,000, what does that mean in practical terms? I'm sorry, I'm ignorant, but.
That particular grant, I don't know that there's any strings on that.
Okay.
It's like a new member grant,
That's a
new member
one-time
grant
deal.
that you don't have to apply for. To probably give you money to hire somebody to apply for next year, so.
But I think the point is that, if I understand it, maybe I don't have it either, these are projects that the community would want to do.
Yeah.
And if we don't get these grants, we're probably gonna do them anyway and pay for them ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's where things work. If it's something that we weren't already going to do and it's just kind of a new project, it doesn't fit into the, hey, let's cover salary project or category, but it probably fits into the, hey, this is something that we would like to do, but we couldn't afford otherwise.
I'm sorry, Ann.
I just wanted to note that the legislature is back in session this week, so if Bob or fellow board members want to reach out to legislators, they are back in session now.
I think that actually is a pointed comment that we should all take, actually. That we know that if there's stuff that we're interested in, we need to let them know. All of us.
Well, I just say, remember the session ends at the end of July this year. So if there's gonna be action, it would have to be by then.
I think thanks, Karen. I think the way that I stand on this is if the position is going to pay for itself, not this position, any position is going to pay for itself, then it makes sense. If we hire somebody for $100,000 and they generate $300,000 in grants, that's a no-brainer. If we hire someone for $100,000 and they generate 20 one year, 30 the next, that doesn't make sense to me. So it has to be something that we can prove that is going to generate cash flow year after year after year to make it, because then we're getting the $300,000 for items that we were going to do in the community, and it's somewhat paying for the position. Yes, somebody else could have done it, maybe town staff, a couple other people, but as long as the return on investment is that high, where it's $100,000 for a person and they generate 300, that's a no-brainer for any position. We can make 70 new positions and just keep doing that. But if it doesn't accumulate that kind of funding, it would be a no for me for any position. So that's where I am. I mean, I don't know if David can find out if there's like, I don't know if, say, North Reading, I know they don't have one, but if North Reading had a sustainability director, they just hired them 3 years ago. Now they got 300 grand in grants. Their salary was 70 grand. You scale that out, that's 210. Like, that's starting to make sense. If you can put maybe something that together, I mean, that would help me personally just be like, this is proven in other communities, that's gonna make sense for me for a chance to work here. You know, nothing's
Yeah,
guaranteed.
that's
We might apply for, you know, $500,000 in grants and get none of them. But, you know, something like that.
So that is slide 6 in my presentation. That's where you can see a history of a couple of examples that have been in the UMass Boston study, where, you know, a $250,000 investment paid back $1.25 million, you know, or as well as the data, you know, example where they're getting 2, 3, and 4 times on an annual basis. I mean, those are hard examples. Or even the the Melrose data doesn't show what they invested in, but it was, you know, $2.5 million over 10 years. So I think those are examples of what you're asking, I think, Chris.
Yeah, $2.5 million. I mean, sign me up tomorrow if that's the case. I mean, to me, to think that we'd get $2.5 million, I'd say there's no way on planet Earth. But Fidel is here, same scenario, where I thought there's no way that I would go with something like that, and then the right person just happens to show up, so.
Well, the climate is a little different right now. I would say like a few years ago, maybe there wasn't this much money to be had. I feel like it's a different you remember, the state was like, oh, we have no money, sorry, Reading.
Right.
And it's a little different now, so it is an investment in ourselves. Okay. Thank you. I'm really excited. I really appreciate the committee pulling all this together because I wasn't even aware of some of these grant programs that Melrose has been successful with. But we're going to start to look at electric vehicles, so that's another one, and MVP. That's a great example. So I don't know if we came to a resolution on what we would do for Bob in the next week, or before next week, I think.
Should we all just provide him whatever feedback we want to provide him, rather than like, if someone feels strongly about $100,000 and somebody else feels strongly about 62 and somebody else feels strongly about 50, like I think people should just provide the feedback that they want to provide. Bob, he already provided us with a particular format, so I think we could, provide the feedback that makes sense to each of us.
All right.
And to do that by next week.
Yep.
By is there a particular date, Bob? I know you said next week would be fine, but just to put it in my calendar, is there a date that would be helpful to you?
At the end of the Patriots game on Sunday.
Okay.
So
We just got moved to 4 o'clock, so you got more time.
the 9th, so the 9th,
Monday morning would be very helpful.
Monday morning, okay.
All right, thanks. And congratulations on getting that application in, yay.
Now, that was Julie.
Yep, no, they did a great job. And, it was a lot of work shepherding it through the school committee as well as the select board and working with Rmld, so it's been a nice collaborative effort.
And let me also add, and this is not specifically at all on the Climate Advisory Committee's request, but in general, I'll take the town clerk's request. My job and staff's job to work with them is, what is the problem? We have to identify the problem, and then is there a different solution than what's been proposed? So, I'll look at the town clerk's request for some part-time clerical help, and I'll say, well, does that really help the bottleneck, if there is one, in the public records requests? And then Laura, Matt, and I will kick around some ideas and possibly come up with a different approach. So I'm especially interested in whether it's boards, committees, or anyone identifying issues. And then let's see if we can solve the issue. And certainly a request that's straightforward could solve the issue, and maybe sometimes there's other ways to do it. So that's what my job will be, and that's why I would really like to have your feedback sooner than later, because this is a pretty labor-intense process where we have a lot of discussions.
Great. Okay, should we move on to the next agenda item?
Lot 5. So here are the updates, folks. Number 1, we closed on the property. We own lot 5.
Yay, exciting,
Deed is registered.
excellent.
The conservation agent, so Chuck walked the property. No real surprises were found, which is
Okay.
awesome.
Okay, good.
Didn't find the Titanic.
There is an existing trail that a lot of folks use that is on the Meadowbrook land. And when I say trail, it's kind of beaten down, and it's pretty well used. It's often used, that exists there. And then conservation also had some other comments on how we might use that area. The board had suggested that I talk with conservation and the conservation committee a little bit about what they would like to see and how it might work. In those discussions, it made sense to me that we probably want to engage the chairs of trails, town forest, and conservation, all, to just kind of talk through, make sure we understand kind of preferences and how it might work, so that when we do speak with Meadowbrook, everyone was kind of in the discussion in terms of what might happen.
Okay.
The goal is not to make that take a long period of time. It's to make it move quickly. And if that means that there's a more immediate solution that's requested, great, or it may just be that everybody kind of already knows what they want. Some issues that might come up would include, would any improvements be desired in the trail? Simple things like markers, indicating where the trail is, things like that. We had the discussion about the possibility of some kind of a restroom facility or something like that on Lot 5. And the folks at Meadowbrook probably will have some interest in understanding what that is. We did have a little bit of back and forth with the folks at Meadowbrook, and they are receptive to us approaching them to have a discussion.
Great.
So I think we just want to have our ducks lined up, if I can use that analogy here,
Yeah.
before we do that, but to do it soon.
Great.
So I think what I, oh, sorry.
Did we already authorize you to do that following, like working with area following the conclusion of, or the closing on lot 5?
I think so.
I think we did. I can't remember the exact language of the motion though.
Yeah, I think what it was before it closes, we're not moving ahead with
Right, right.
anything. But after it closes, kind of figure it out. I interpreted it as I was going to talk with Conservation Commission and Conservation Administrator about it.
Okay.
In that discussion that we did have, so Annika, Chuck, and I did chat. It sounds like I think it would make sense to get Trails and Town Forest also involved in the process.
Right.
Probably, if I would think the chairs would be able to kind of get feedback from their groups and bring it to the discussion. Just make sure we understand what we're talking about, and then bring that back to the board, and then allow the board to move forward to start a discussion with Meadowbrook and see what they're amenable to.
Okay.
So that would be my suggestion. If that makes sense to the board, I would be willing to take it further, or I'm happy if someone else decides they really want to dig into this thing. Either way.
So like, you could schedule them and get a date and. I think you're doing a great job, Mark. And I do think there's a lot of synergies, and I think that'll be a great conversation, and I think they'll be able to get back to you pretty quickly.
Folks are excited.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, we'd love to be able to come back to Meadowbrook with our thoughts.
Okay.
And I think, again, their desire is to kind of understand what's going on. I think that the notion of establishing kind of a more formal path there, trail, whatever we want to call it, actually meets their needs really well.
Okay.
And allows them to kind of make sure that they have pretty good certainty as to what's going to go on there.
Sure.
And I think that I think it works for everybody, but we just need to have that discussion. So.
Yeah, no, I think our original thing expired at midnight on the 31st or something like that was is the way that worked, but I mean, I'm fine with you continuing to reach out and see what we can do about easements and everything, so I'm fine with it.
All right, we still have a couple CONSCOM members. Does that sound okay? What we're discussing? Okay, super, thank you. Carlo, you wanna weigh in? How's that sound?
Great job, Mark.
Keep up the good work, Mark.
Good job. No, that's exciting. That's really great.
Cool, so I'll pursue it that way and then come back to the board with, once we've had a chance to chat with the groups.
So you'll come back to the board before approaching Meadowbrook then? Okay. All right.
Yeah, and just understand that coming back to the board in the public meeting, we'll be essentially announcing, we'll be agreeing on what we want to do specifically.
Okay.
Or a proposal, right? It'd be like your initial
Yeah,
proposal to
proposal.
them.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes, exactly.
Yep. Okay. No, that sounds great. Wonderful. Could be up and running and
Have we been in touch with Ivrea about this?
I have talked to Avery briefly about it,
Okay.
and I would need to talk to her about what the next step is.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering if is our next conversation, will it end up being an open session or executive session, depending on, is it going to be a negotiation, and do we, and I'm not sure.
Why don't I touch base with Avery and
Yeah.
get her?
I think that's worth doing, yeah.
Okay. And may I ask Bob, do you know if we got the appropriation for $150 from the state yet? For this?
150,000.
150,000, thank you.
We were approved. I don't know if we have cash in hand.
Okay, thank you. It's coming, they're good for it. Okay, that's great. So, all right, so we've discussed a few future agenda items. This would be one of them. Let's see. I wrote a couple of them down. Bob suggested bringing the Board of Health in for an update,
That would
probably
be good.
sooner rather than later.
Yep.
Let's see. Ivrea is gonna come back to us with our sponsors for our open meeting law complaints.
Common District Meeting House will send us
Yes.
a written update,
Okay.
their progress and thoughts.
I know the community garden resident team was gonna come and talk to us. Planning to come and talk to us on the 18th, and they do have that public session happening this week. So that'll be exciting, and they have done a lot of thinking and estimating, how far the initial 10,000 from the state will go and how much maybe matching funds they might need from the town.
Then another future agenda, we should talk about the transition between Bob and Fidel, and that's something, we can coordinate timing on with
Okay.
Bob as to when that conversation makes sense.
Very good.
And I guess for me, I don't know if we were voting on the ARPA members, et cetera.
Oh, yes.
FinCom
Yep.
already did, and,
I think that was gonna be on the 18th.
okay.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
ARPA committee, 18th. Yep, thanks, Chris.
Is there a charter document or a mission document that exists related to that?
I think there is, and it went through some changes, and so, and it's a new year, so we should probably get a hold of that. Why don't I, reach out to FinCom and get the latest and greatest for you all.
I don't know if Ed is still live on the Zoom, but it may not actually be there, I'm sure.
They do have a meeting coming up as well, so, I would likely attend that, and we can bring it
Okay.
up then as well.
All right.
That's okay, no worries.
Karen, Ed is ready and prepared to speak.
Oh, great.
Hi, Ed, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I just woke up. No, I've been paying attention diligently.
It's only 9.
Throughout. Yeah, so we do have a doc. We whittled it down a little bit. I think we were waiting to update it to actually have your attendees, but I can circulate that. We had, basically the document I think we had before was probably a little bit wider in scope, and in our meeting, we kind of pared it down and to really just to focus more on ARPA. I think initially we had, ARPA, free cash, and we had, kind of a lot of different kind of funding streams that were in there. After our discussion in our meeting, we just, amongst the committee, we decided just to be able to focus in more just on ARPA. The rest of it, I think, will cascade from there. So I think that's, probably the main thing that you saw, Karen. But I'll dust that off. And we do need to update it because I do have the school committee liaisons or committee members, whatever you want to call them. They did that in one of their last meetings as well.
Great.
So Ed, if it's possible to get us that document sooner than later, that would be great.
Sure.
Your comment on it being kind of very ARPA focused gives me a little pause. So I would very much like to see it kind of ASAP if possible.
Yeah, Jim, I'll get it to you right after the Pats game. I just want to be able to show that I was paying attention.
Yeah. The ideal is if they don't play, it's due before.
Yeah, the time will come to a halt.
Okay, are you ready for minutes? Or,
Sarah, if I might just ask for two small agenda items.
sure.
I think one's more important. I'd like the board to formally adopt Juneteenth as a town holiday at a meeting upcoming, perhaps the 18th. I don't see that the town has any choice in the matter, regardless of what its opinion might be.
Okay.
But formally, in the personnel policies, it is not listed.
Okay.
And there's a couple reasons that doing it sooner would help. One is just to clarify it because, we don't know when you may adopt any changes to the personnel policy. But as a practical matter, I need to go to negotiate with 8 unions, how that impacts them.
Okay.
Some of the more recent unions, we've discussed that, but if you recall, some of the contracts you approved were over a year ago when Juneteenth was not on anyone's radar. And more specifically, for the 24/7 departments in public safety, there is a financial cost to it. They are paid when they work on holidays. So I just need to, take this off Fidel's plates and dispense with it as soon as possible.
Okay.
The other one is the board should be aware that it does need to approve your executive session minutes from the town manager selection process. I'll check with council, but I believe the screening committee minutes will remain in executive session in perpetuity and not public.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, I have a request, please.
Yep, Carla, go ahead.
We've discussed it in the past, but I don't know when we could move forward on it, but we really need to have a formal discussion either amongst ourselves or form a committee about the land that we own, and more specifically the Zani property is my go-to piece of property for this, but we've been talking about this for months, and I don't know how to get the ball rolling as far as what we have. All those acres of land over there that are just sitting there, and whether it's, ARPA money can get the ball rolling or highest and best use, we have to still figure out what the highest and best use is and the wants and needs of the town. So without having any discussion about the wants and needs of the town, the land is just gonna sit there forever. And I don't think that's right. And other parcels as well, but that's a big one.
That's, it's sitting on the list right now. Let's see, I'm on page.
We had a broader list because it's like if we're gonna, so the thing with that, so when did we ever get we got a brief update, I believe, from the conservation administrator, but I don't even remember it. I feel like it was a lifetime ago because they went out there and they did an analysis about how much of it is upland, how much can potentially be used, and it's not that much. It's mostly wetlands. So, yeah, but I think that would be the basis. I think it needs to start as a discussion. Either we take a broader look of multiple parcels like the one over by the high school?
Yeah, so that's how it read. It read,
Okay.
discuss recent land purchases and any
Okay.
other town-owned large buildable parcels, parens, Oakland Road, Simon's Way, other.
So I know Bob was gonna send us some data that was done several years ago by a prior board to sort of identify parcels, but on the other hand, if we just wanna focus on several parcels, we could have an agenda item to discuss just those parcels rather than wading through that list.
It would be good to know if there are any other large buildable parcels. If that's,
And that was my question to the board is, what do you want? So I can certainly look for large buildable parcels there. Obviously, there's not many.
Okay. That would be helpful.
Okay.
So Carlo, I think we only have, correct me if I'm wrong, we have one more meeting in January, so I think that is looking like a February agenda item, if that's okay.
I'm not saying it has to be the next meeting or this month, but I know we've discussed it. And, you know, Mark and I kind of agreed that. Well, I'm not speaking for Mark, but I think Mark and I were on the same page that we'd be willing to take the lead on this if it comes to that, but we need to start on the bigger parcels. I know we have a lot, but most of it doesn't really, you know, there's not a good use. So let's try to figure out what is of good use and what we need, and what is it going to be a building? Is it going to be a recreation space? Is it going to be whatever?
Yep.
February's fine.
Okay.
Karen, question about the Juneteenth agenda item. I think it's great and certainly we should be codifying it. I was wondering about if we're going to be codifying it, should we also have some kind of acknowledgement, resolution or proclamation at the same time that recognizes, like Bob said, you know, it's, you know, wasn't on anyone's radar screen, and I think that's true for the majority of the community, but certainly it has had very significant meaning for a very long time for a portion of our population. So I'm wondering, would we want to do some kind of commemoration or acknowledgement or proclamation together with sort of the codifying, formalizing of it within town policy, or is that something that the town or board would want to wait until June to do, so it's closer in time to the actual holiday?
I think it makes, in my opinion, it just makes sense to wait until then, only because we can't even fit stuff on the agenda currently.
Sure.
It seems as if Bob is crunched for time to be able to get this done, and then, yeah, it makes sense to May.
June.
Yeah, May, you know,
Okay.
like,
Yeah,
people
no,
talk
I
about it in May, and
Outside
then
of June,
and then it gets added.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay, are we ready for minutes?
I only have one edit if you want.
No, it's good. I don't have any. I was like, these are really long. I don't remember what I said. They look good to me.
So the only thing that I see is December 14th minutes, so that's the third one. Page 3.
Hold on a second. Because Ann also sent some comments, which I'll get to. So December 14th, I'll share the document with you.
Thank you.
Page 3 at the bottom.
Can you all read this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. A little bigger.
So, yeah, right at the bottom, the final sentence says, select board member asked if the grant to pay for the bridge, so it doesn't say who it is. It wasn't me. So it's just missing the person's name.
Grant to pay for the bridge capital work. Wait.
So somebody asked for it.
I think I have that in my notes. We need someone to find my notes.
Oh, it might have been
so
me
I
I
because
was gonna say that sounds.
it might have
like
been
you.
me because I heard Bob say, "Oh yeah, I take that grant money and I put it into free cash." I started
I
asking.
know it was not me.
It might have been me. And, yeah, and so then my takeaway was that, you know, depending on the type of grant, it might go to free cash. Because, I remember Jane explaining that the grant was expended directly on the project.
That's all I got.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's correct, and that's
Okay.
my mistake. I should have put select board member Herrick. I don't
Okay.
usually say select board member blank.
So is this 12:14 we're on right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tonight, so just one more change at the very, very, very end. I think we should move Town Clerk Laura Jem's comment ahead of the motion to adjourn. Because otherwise it's out of order. It kind of snuck in, as I remember, it was kind of a race to the finish.
Yeah, it wasn't seconded, I think. What's the deal?
Oh, that could be, that could
I
be.
think that's what it was.
Yeah, we just,
It's a good idea.
somehow, yeah, it may be either putting it ahead of, yeah, I think that's the simplest as opposed to separating the motion and the second. Just to keep that cool. One other question, Bob, on page 2, sorry, I'm sure it's page 2. Yes, page 2. Select Board Member Haley asked why people applied for the position if they required far higher wages. And the answer was, been happening in other positions in the library was, it says nothing adversarial about the request. Is that what it was, or it's nothing out of the ordinary?
It doesn't seem like that makes sense.
Adversarial.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't seem like the right word. I was struggling for the right word, but I couldn't come up with it.
Abnormal?
Abnormal is
Might
what,
have
yeah,
been
abnormal
abnormal.
works.
Yeah.
I mean, the point was it's happening elsewhere.
I think that was my comment, and I did say the word adversarial. It may not have really had the intended meaning.
We got what you meant then.
There was some, I don't know, there was some question about, is the library different? You know, is the fact that did the library advertise the position differently? Is this a one-off thing? And my answer was no. They didn't do it in an adversarial way. There was, this has happened in other departments, but, upon reflection, certainly I could have chosen a better word. Maybe unusual.
That's how I interpreted it, but
I guess if you said it, it should just stay the way that
Yeah.
you said it. And
Yeah.
Well,
It's not like it's
up to
my
you
word.
folks. I remember thinking that was the best word choice at the time.
oh, okay.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, excuse me for a sec.
Bob,
Anne suggested comments on the 15th, just before you dispense with all the minutes.
Bob, the way I think I remember, because now I think I heard you say, I thought you were saying that the person who'd made the request for more money was not acting in an adversarial manner. That's what I took from your
I
comment.
think that's right, Anne.
Yep.
So not that the library was adversarial, but that the, and that there was not, so then you want to take out that the library was, and just say, and there was. I think that was how I heard it. I don't know if that's how you meant it.
You're right, Anne. I'm thinking of how Amy described it. That's exactly what she meant when she went over it in the presentation. That the person was just asking in a very polite way, very
Yeah.
friendly way.
Yeah.
Anything else on the 14th?
All good.
I'm good.
Go back.
Okay, let me call up the 15th, and then you can discuss the other two sets where there hasn't been comments. I'm going to call up Anne's draft. see the addition Ann made experience.
Yep.
Very good.
Fine.
And I don't know if there was one other change. Let me just,
I feel like I had one. Oh, I think it might have just been deleting some apostrophes
Yeah,
at the
that's on the-
beginning.
It's at the beginning.
Yeah, that's all it was, yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's all. Okay, thank you.
Now, should we go back to 12.7 for a minute, please, Bob?
Certainly.
So the middle of page 2, Mark Doxer asked how she would lead. I think the word standing can come out.
That's fine, because I didn't know what that meant when I read it.
Yeah,
but-
yeah, I didn't either, so I might have said it, but I didn't mean it. That was my only comment on that one.
Talking about things.
Oh, sorry, actually, one other question on that one, sorry. On page, hang on, I'm gonna count from the top. Okay, this is. Now I lost my place. On page 12, the second to last line, Mark asked about status of, it says Meeting House Restaurant. I'm just make it Common District Meeting House Restaurant. Right before that, whoops, and up one more. There you go, right there. Common District.
Just saw under it, it said Mark asked about Bangkok Spice. I'm like,
I was hungry.
I know. Thanks for asking. I think they're open now for everyone who cares.
Awesome.
I'm on vacation.
Right, that's it. The 7th. And so how about a motion to approve the meeting minutes for December 7th, December 8th, December 14th, and December 15th, all 2021 as amended?
Second. Any discussion? None appearing. Board members, would I see you? Carlo?
Yes.
Anne? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Wonderful, we're caught up.
All right.
Right. Great. I think we only need one more motion.
How about a motion to adjourn at 9:17 PM?
Second.
Excellent. Board members, Carlo?
Yes.
Anne? Yes. Mark?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And Karen, yes. We are adjourned.